Let's start. Thank you for being here. My name is Cornelius from Team Malizia. It's a pleasure to host this event together with our partner, the German Ministry of the Environment. Dear guests, dear friends of Malizia, dear sailors. Any sailor in the room? Hands up. Okay. Dear representatives from the diplomatic corps, representatives from the United Nations, representatives from this German house, the consulate, but also from the permanent representation to the UN. Dear ocean lovers, we as Team Malizia, we host this event here. We take a pit stop basically here in New York before the journey continues, the race back from New York to Europe, the so-called New York One Day, which will start in a couple of days, which will be sailed by our sailor Boris Herrmann. We take this opportunity to highlight the importance of ocean protection, ocean conservation. This is at the heart of Team Malizia. You will hear later about our mission, our campaign, about the projects. So this kind of like format of events already has quite some tradition. And it's a privilege now here to address this important topic at stake, ocean protection. The SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, is our logo. You can see it here on the back of my shirt. It's in our sails on our boat that you can see here. The SDG number 14, life below water, is important, but in connection with SDG 13, climate action. We will hear later about that. Distinguished guests, just a couple of housekeeping things. We hope to close the panel after our keynotes. We're going to have the panel discussion by 7:30. And then we split. We have some guests that are coming with us to the rooftop bar, so don't run away. The restaurant and the dinner will be here in that house. Before we continue, I also want to say hello to everyone online. We're live streaming this event. So if you miss anything or if you want to repeat it because the discussion was so inspiring, don't worry, go to Team Malizia on YouTube and you can watch it again. Housekeeping, if you go out, you look for the restrooms. They're left hand are the men, right hand are ladies. If you have questions for the panel later, we will have one microphone. A colleague of mine will go around and take questions. Please, be short. I'm not sure. I cannot promise you whether we have enough time for questions, but I'll try to save some time for that. And then please stand up, state your name, your organization, and ask your short question. Right? Okay. I have a bunch of people I would like to introduce. First of all, it is my great pleasure to, of course, welcome here at the stage or next to me the representative here of the German House, our host, Ambassador Thomas Zahneisen. A couple of words about him. So before your current role here in New York, he served as a director for humanitarian assistance at the Federal Foreign Office in Berlin, with nearly a decade of diplomatic experiences in Afghanistan and Pakistan. Ambassador Zahneisen was served as a deputy head of the German embassy in Kabul. His extensive international experiences also includes postings in the Democratic Republic of Congo, the German mission to the UN in New York, and the German embassy in Kigali, in Rwanda. And it's a pleasure that you made it today. Unfortunately, Ambassador Antje Lendertse is not available today, but you made it, and I'm looking forward for your welcome to this event. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Maybe I'll take the microphone.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I mean, you may have noticed that most of my postings are landlocked countries. So, and I even come from the most remote place from the seaside in Germany, from Garmisch, high in the mountains. So let's say I'm not authoritative on oceans, but I will try my best. So thank you very much for coming. I think you had got already an excellent introduction. In my speaking notes, I was told that New York is one of the best spots for ocean-related activities, as sailing. Well, I don't know about New York and ocean-related activities so much. I think the big events were 100 years ago, Blue Ribbon, ocean crossings. I don't know what the city itself really contributed to ocean activities, but I know the UN is the home of the United Nations. And when it comes to ocean-related activities, that's the institution that excelled itself in recent times. I think we had one extraordinary negotiation, and those who live here all the time and work in the other building, we are not spoiled by success, but what we witnessed last year, the negotiations on the UN Treaty for the High Sea, the BBNJ, that was in terms of what we usually achieve an exceptional result. And I think it was for us more than symbolic that our two ministers, Annalena Baerbock for Foreign Affairs and Steffi Lemke for the Ministry of Environment, signed it jointly. They tried to be as quickly as possible. We were the first to sign, and this is, of course, not the end of the story. Now it's phase 2, which is equally important. That it is, we need a lot of swift ratifications of the treaty, and I think Under Secretary General Sabah Biswaj will talk about it in detail. Our colleague from the Ministry for the Environment, Ingo Naberhaus, will, I think, also approach this. I think so we need all the efforts of member states to really move ahead with the implementation. It's absolutely crucial. Agreement, and we need to do that every how possible. I think member states, we have our duty, but we need to be UN word stakeholders to help us. So I think we need the stakeholders to help us with the implementation, but even more importantly, to put action for ocean protection at the center of what we're doing, because it is really high time. We hear a lot more from the panelists today, the impact of climate change, the loss of biodiversity, and many other things. And I'm particularly happy to have our co-host, Boris Herrmann, and his team Malizia, next to us, and with us for this event. You're hugely popular. Even somebody from the other side of Germany knows you well. So thank you for joining us, and I'm really very much looking forward to your introduction now, which is more substantial than mine, and to a very enlightened discussion tonight. And I hope you all enjoy the meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Thomas. Of course, Boris Herrmann is already has already like a name here in New York, and some of you might remember the iconic crossing in 2019 when Boris and our team delivered the climate activist Greta Thunberg to New York, to the ocean, to the climate conference here. Which was also a bit the kickoff of our campaign, Erasing Must Win Climate Action Now. But I guess some of you also, you want to have like some background about Boris Herrmann. He was the first German actually sailing around the world in the Vendée Globe, which is a solo, non-stop circumnavigation in 2020. And he made it on the 5th place after a very dramatic ending. Boris is not only Germany's most famous sailor, I would say, in the offshore scene, but also a passionate ocean ambassador and climate ambassador. He recently received the German Medal of Merit, das Bundesverdienstkreuz, and he's appointed ambassador of the UN Ocean Decade. He and our team that he has built up, we are more than just a sailing team. Team Malizia is, of course, driven by the passion for the sports, but we are also very much driven by the passion for Mother Nature, and in particular the environment where our activities and our sports is taking place, the ocean. Now we're here in New York between these races, and I'm very happy that Boris can be tonight with us. despite all these jet lags that you have from traveling, and not only traveling across the Atlantic, but also, of course, here with all these endless events and activities. It's a great pleasure to have you here, and the floor is yours to say a few words. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Cornelius, and thank you all for coming today. Yeah, I'm always amazed how you organize these events. This is a very special one today. I'm very impressed by the panelists you invited, Cornelius. Thank you for bringing us all together in this room today. This has a certain tradition, as you already said. We try to link our sport activities, the stopovers and the starts and the finish of the races, to create touch points where we come together around the topic of preservation, ocean preservation, but also climate action. How did this come together in our team? I started most of my life I spent on the ocean, racing race yachts 6 times around the planet now, and many times across the Atlantic. And other passes I have been through the Northeast Passage, which shouldn't be possible. There should be ice, but there was barely any ice left when I went through with a modern carbon fiber racing boat. So with our sport, I think we can witness climate change on a global scale like in very few other activities. These races, and especially the non-stop race that we mentioned before, the Vendée Globe race, which starts again end of this year, takes place every four years since more than 30 years. The route is actually affected by climate change. The warming of the Antarctic leads to breaking of ice earlier in the southern summer season, and the stronger prevailing winds make the ice drift further north. So the barrier, the boundary of our trajectory around Antarctica gets pushed further north with these tendencies and these changes. So it makes our route longer. Once in an event with school kids, they asked me, how do you call your trip a race around the world? You only go around the South Pole. But actually first you go south in the Atlantic, then around Antarctica and back up, so it's more or less equivalent of the length of the equator. And if you go very close to the Antarctic, then obviously the distance is shorter, but with the ice has a big risk down there. We need to stay north, further north, almost each edition. So me personally, I have been impacted by this in one particular race back in 2010, where we took so much longer than my crewmate. So that race was 2, in that case, 100 days on the ocean with that as a friend. I'm not sure which is easier to be alone 80 days or with 2. He lost 25 kilos on the trip because it took so much longer, and then there was a lot of talk about climate change and being connected to this, and so that triggered then more and more our understanding that with our sport we're in the middle of this, and we also see patterns change at sea. There's a Sargasso Sea, which is a region that has always been with some visible like algae or seaweed on the ocean, and there's now a second one growing more close to the equator, and the trade winds, which were from West Africa all the way to the Caribbean, and people here that some of you who know a bit like the Southern Caribbean or I think Miami area, they have lots of problems with all this seaweed coming to their shore. So those are changes we can actually see, witness, and that drives our motivation to look into this. And it's really a curiosity, I think. Doing this sport, we are curious for the adventure, for exploration, for going out, for finding out what's our limit in this sport, and then this kind of drives us also to more and more to wanting to understand what's below us. How does this all connect? Climate change and the ocean. The oceans absorb a lot of CO2, and this CO2 flux is one of the big uncertainty factors in climate modeling. And data, ship data, is actually quite important to calibrate modeling, global modeling of this flux from the atmosphere to the ocean, which is mainly based on satellite observations. And we actually achieved with our races around the world 2 big data sets of very precise CO2 data around the southern oceans, where there's no other vessels going except us. And that led scientists to understand that the southern ocean has actually a slightly lesser capacity to absorb CO2 than estimated. I don't want to say too much. Thank you very much, everyone, for here. Thank you to the German House for hosting us here in the site of the UN building. For us, it's a particular thing because we carry the UN logo on our sails, the SDG logo, and what did I forget, Cornelius? Thank you for organizing this. I'm looking forward to the evening, and enjoy.
Only forgot to mention this event is also endorsed by the UN Ocean Decade. So also very happy that we partnering you as an ambassador for the German Committee of the Ocean Decade. So it's quite important that we come together as these partnership networks, and we promote our mission and promote our goals. Let's move on. Actually, there's a second slide I would like to show that you also see a little bit who is here tonight and who is speaking. But first of all, I would like to introduce the topic a little bit more profoundly. Covering more than 2/3 of our planet, the ocean is the lifeblood of Earth, regulating our climate, providing oxygen, so every second breath that we take comes from the ocean, is oxygen from the ocean. Being the biggest ecosystem and wildlife habitat at the cradle of our human existence. Yet, these vast and vital waters face unprecedented threats from overfishing, pollution, climate change, deep sea mining, destruction. The high seas cover over 65% of the Earth's surface, enormous areas that are beyond national jurisdiction. They are often out of sight, out of mind, and also, unfortunately, out of our hearts, because this is what we need. When we want to create change, we need our hearts and our emotions to be convinced. That's missing. Our collective action today will shape the future of the ocean of tomorrow. But lately there are good news on the way. In March last year, the United Nations have successfully adopted the High Seas Treaty. And this was also already mentioned by you. BBNJ, beyond biodiversity, beyond national jurisdiction. We come later to that point. Why do we say High Sea Treaty is so easy to say? Like, these appropriations. It's not the same, right? Okay, we have this later on the panel. Yeah, and this treaty actually is such a lighthouse, I think, for all of us, and gives us hope, because it was negotiated for so many years, decades, and finally they came to this treaty. And it's just a document at the end, but we hope, and this is also this discussion today and this panel about how can we bridge a treaty, a document, an international collaboration, and bring this into actual action, into concrete projects. And one of these goals, and there are probably many, and you will touch upon, I guess, a little bit the details of this treaty, but one important thing is that the goal by 2030, by the end of this decade, that we have, at least hopefully, 30% of the high seas, so everything which is beyond the economic zone of 200 miles from shore, will be protected, a protected area, marine protected areas. Or Sylvia, you would say hope spots, right? Right. So that's a milestone, and that's gonna be the topic of today. The questions I already mentioned. So does this treaty come in time, or is it maybe already too late? How can we all contribute to make this treaty a success story? What kind of actions are needed? And how should we deal with rising topics that are threatening this deal, such as, for example, deep sea mining. Our first keynote speaker is from that institution that has actually negotiated this treaty, and I'm very happy that Miguel de Serpa Juarez, is this correctly?
Perfect.
I'm not Portuguese, but all right. Appointed as the Undersecretary General for Legal Affairs and United Nations Legal Council in September 2013. And you, Miguel, you have been a pivotal figure in providing unified central legal services for the United Nations. In addition to overseeing the Office of Legal Affairs, you serve as a focal point for UN Oceans promoting coordination and coherence of UN activities related to ocean and coast areas. You were appointed by the United Nations Secretary General as Secretary General of the Intergovernmental Conference on a legally binding instrument for the conservation and sustainable use of marine biodiversity in areas beyond national jurisdiction. So you really, you are really the expert here about this treaty. Moreover, you are a special advisor to the presidents of the UN conference supporting the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goal number 14, which I mentioned already, life below water. Thank you, Miguel. The floor is yours. I'm very looking forward to your interventions. Thank you.
If you keep repeating, you'll be able to say the name of this treaty without reading. I have a few years of training, but I am not the real expert in this room. I'm just the head of a team of experts who have dedicated many years assisting states putting this together. And for my 11-year tenure in the United Nations, this is in fact the achievement that gives me the biggest pride. That's the thing I'm most proud of, because this is tangible. It was an extremely difficult negotiation. I myself had some doubts during the process that we would get there. So we had some dramatic moments last March, but it's here. It's here. So, distinguished members of the panel and the guests and the ambassador, it is of course with great pleasure that we gather today in the German House to address one of the most pressing challenges of our time, the preservation of our ocean. At the onset, I wish to thank the German Federal Ministry for the Environment, Team Malizia, for inviting me to provide some very brief opening remarks for this evening's event. I also wish to recognize the sailing community gathered here this evening, individuals who have developed a unique understanding of the ocean's vastness, its power, but also its fragility. And perhaps also our own vulnerability as humans existing on this blue planet, and by extension, the importance to protect our ocean. As we all know, we stand at a critical juncture where the fate of our ocean hangs in the balance. And encompassing 2/3 of our planet's surface, areas beyond jurisdiction are home to a rich array of marine life, from the tiniest little plankton to the largest whales, which all play crucial roles in regulating our climate, sustaining biodiversity, and providing vital resources to humanity around the world. Now, despite this importance, many challenges remain. Overfishing, large-scale pollution, just to name a few. And the repercussions are very real, ranging from ocean acidification and warming, loss of biodiversity, and so on. The United Nations World Ocean Assessments are very clear regarding these trends, as are the scientists and knowledge holders mobilizing globally through the United Nations Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. Every day brings a new set of data that underline the urgency of our collective action. However, in the midst of these challenges, there is some progress. Of course, the BBNJ treaty is the main progress lately. And the adoption in past June was really an historic step forward. It's proof of the vitality of multilateralism, and we need that right now for many reasons that you will all understand. This agreement, I think, considerably fortifies the international legal framework for the conservation and sustainable use of marine biodiversity in over 2/3 of the ocean. It applies to all areas beyond national jurisdiction. I believe it will make important contributions to achieving the ocean-related goals and targets of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. The forthcoming high-level event on ocean action, organized by Costa Rica in San Jose, early June 2024, I'll be present. So this year I will not celebrate Ocean Day with you, Sylvia, in New York, and our colleagues. I'm going to go to Costa Rica. And especially next year's 2025 United Nations Ocean Conference, the third one, which is going to happen in Nice, France, are also examples of important opportunities for governments to support further and urgent action to better conserve and sustainably manage the ocean. It is also important that this momentum is maintained through education and awareness raising initiatives for the general public. We can also do our part as individuals in our everyday life. Celebrations such as the United Nations World Oceans Day, which takes place every year on June the 8th, are amongst those important moments that provide an opportunity to raise global awareness of the benefits of that humankind derives from our ocean and our collective duty to use it responsibly and sustainably. Today's event is also part of this necessary mobilization in favor of the ocean. I'd like to thank again the Permanent Mission of Germany, Team Malizia, of course. And are you sailing back to Europe? Can I come?
It's a solo race.
Thank you for organizing this event, which gives us the opportunity to come as stewards for the ocean, united by the common understanding that protecting the ocean is a priority. So I look forward to hearing from the panelists, a diverse group of individuals who are strongly committed to the oceans, like I am, and let's enjoy our evening together.
Thank you, Miguel. And it's so important that you also mentioned education. That's actually also like one of the lighthouse projects in Team Malizia, our My Ocean Challenge program that is founded in 2018 by Boris and Earle, his wife. And we have reached around the world since then 75,000 kids at the age between 8 and 14. And for sure, what you just said, like, you know, spreading the word, spreading the message, these generations, they're super important because they not only will suffer from the consequences if we don't act today, but also they are the ones, they find the solutions to problems. And I think Team Malizia already did a great job here, and we will continue with that journey for sure. And the BBNJ will be part of our Malizia booklet for these kids, for sure. It is my distinct honor to introduce now one of the most extraordinary figures in the world of marine science and conservation, Dr. Sylvia Earle. Dr. Earle is a pioneering oceanographer, explorer, author, lecturer, and scientist, of course, whose remarkable career spans more than 6 decades. As a National Geographic Explorer in Residence and former Chief Scientist of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, she has dedicated her life to studying the world's oceans and advocating for their protection. Often referred to as her deepness, Dr. Earle has led over 100 expeditions and logged more than 7,000 hours underwater. She is the founder of Mission Blue, a global coalition aiming to establish marine protected areas or hope spots around the globe. Her passion and tireless efforts have earned her numerous titles, including the prestigious TED Prize and being named Time Magazine's first hero for the planet Ocean. Today, we are privileged to have Dr. Earle here, sharing her invaluable insights and profound knowledge, and moreover, her inspiration and her passion with us. Please join me in welcoming the legendary Dr. Sylvia Earle. Sylvia.
I think I'll stand here. I can see everyone. Really, it's my honor to be among you. For those of you who know the sea, spent years on the surface. Right. Wonder how often you've wondered what's under the boat. Probably every day, every time you're out there. But it's only in really recent times that we're able to answer the question, what's under the boat? What's out there? What's down there? I feel really fortunate to have arrived on the planet when I did, but I think as kids in the 21st century, they're even more fortunate because of the knowledge that continues to grow. We've learned more. Literally, we've learned more about the nature of the ocean, why it matters to everyone, everywhere, all the time. Since the middle of the 20th century, at the same time, we now can see, and certainly I do as a witness, that we have lost more across the globe of the resilience of nature. When you think about, if we did not know what is now known about why nature matters, why the ocean matters to every breath we take, every drop of water we drink, doesn't matter where you are. If you've never seen the ocean or touched the ocean, we now can see that we're all sea creatures. We need the ocean. We do. No ocean, no life. Trying to set up housekeeping on Mars. Some people are really aspiring to do that. At the same time, we're trying to think of terraforming Mars. We're doing a pretty good job of Marsiforming Earth. Think about it. What we're doing to our home planet, literally the only place in the universe that can be our true home. We are of the earth, we are of the ocean. On my watch, as a witness, privileged to spend thousands of hours under the sea, to live underwater on 10 different times, and using submarines to go deep within the ocean. And I think what astronauts have seen, that only a few humans have had the privilege of going high in the sky, coming back and telling us what it's all about. So I feel personally driven because of the privilege that I have had to see what most people have not. To understand that the ocean is alive. It's not just water. The water is important. No life without water. There could be water without life, but there's no life without water. And now we know, again, what our predecessors could not know, that there's life from the surface of the ocean to the greatest depths and even beneath the bottom of the ocean, because the ocean really, the sea floor is a leaky place. Water trickles down for a great distance beneath the bottom, and there's life wherever the water occurs. Microbes, not whales, but little guys that live beneath the bottom of the sea. When you take it all together, the greatest abundance and diversity of life, no question, as rich and wonderful as rainforests are, it's the ocean where the action really is. All the major divisions of animals, and you think of all the other microbes, all of the photosynthesizers, representatives out there in the ocean, only about half have representation on the land. You can embrace a place in the water column, in a coral reef, in a kelp forest, in mud, along the mouth of a river delta in the sea, and find a dozen phyla of animals, divisions of life. Only about 15 divisions of life occur on all of the land and freshwater put together. So it's the ocean where biodiversity really rocks. But we didn't know that when I was a child. We are the beneficiaries of those who have been witnesses gathering data, information, throughout all of our history, passing it along from one generation to the next. Never as great a period of learning and understanding as has occurred just since the middle of the 20th century, at the same time that our species has been so effective as our numbers have increased, the numbers of our fellow citizens on the planet have decreased. So, what are the numbers? 90% of the sharks, gone. Half the coral reefs, gone. And that's true with kelp forests. It's true of seagrass meadows. It's true of tuna fish. It's true of cod. It's true, go down the whole list of life that was there when I was a child, now in diminishing numbers. We talk, and we should, about the effects of what we take from the land, clear-cutting forests, occupying about half of the terrestrial parts of the planet with agriculture just to feed ourselves. We can look at how much progress we've made in terms of protecting the land. About 15% is safeguarded proactively in parks and reserves, with the goal to double that number by 2030. But the ocean, we're only at about 3% of honest protection for the ocean. 97% open for exploitation. Subsidizing the extraction of wildlife by the ton. You know, we talk about illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. Far and away, the biggest concern should be, and is, legal, subsidized extraction of ocean wildlife, justified based on food security, which I have to say, it truly is not. There are other ways to feed ourselves than with wild animals from the sea. Not to say that we can't take some. We probably always will, we always have. But we have gone so far overboard with new markets, developing new tastes, new habits, using technologies that really don't give fish or squid or krill a chance. We have to think differently about climate and life in the ocean. We've come a long way about climate and life on the land. And plans to, let's plant 1 trillion trees to help recover what we've lost, what we have taken. I don't see how we can put 1 trillion tuna back in the ocean. The best thing we can do is protect what remains of what's still in good condition. Think of the ocean, 95% of the biosphere. It's not just 70% of the surface, it's 3 dimensions, all the way to the bottom. Carbon-based units that we call whales, and tuna, and shrimp, and squid, or whatever, life. We are carbon-based units too, if you think about the carbon cycle in technical terms, biological terms. So when you think about what impact has removing so much life out of the sea had as it relates to climate. I mean, there are people, economists, who are trying to crunch the numbers and come up with answers. Should we be giving carbon credits for keeping the whales alive, for keeping squid alive, for protecting coral reefs and kelp forests and seagrass meadows? What's the carbon value as it relates to climate, as it relates to planetary security? Security. That's a word that just came to my attention today when there was an announcement in the Wall Street Journal about the importance that the Defense Department in this country now seems to be attributing to mining the deep sea for minerals for security reasons. Wait a minute. If you want to have planetary security, we have to take care of the planet first. Number one. Number one. Everything that we do, we should think about what can we do to keep the planet safe. If you like to breathe, you'll listen up. Okay, there are minerals in the deep sea. They've been gathering in manganese nodules, so-called, these metallic nodules, around hydrothermal vents and crusts. And yes, we've been fostering our civilization with minerals from the land, where at least we can see what's going on. Sometimes restore some of the damage that's been done for taking. We can really do a better job of mining, but in the deep sea, who's going to fix the damage that is done? And why should it matter in the first place? The illusion is manganese nodules are just dead stones. They're not. They're formed from biological processes around something alive, or something that was alive, like a shark's tooth, or a little bit of shell, something organic, layer by layer, over hundreds of thousands, millions of years to make something the size of my fist. We're not going to restore that or have it come back in any reasonable period of time. So, we need to really think carefully about, is it really something we need? And if so, should we be really careful? Right now we have a chance, the best chance for protection of the high seas, of life in the high seas, and land, and the deep sea. Bravo to those countries who have said, let's hit the pause button on mining the deep sea. Thank you, Germany, for being one of those countries. Thank you, France. Thank those countries who've said, wait a minute, the precautionary principles should apply here. We need to know more. If ever we'll know enough to justify tearing up for short-term gain something that we'll never replace from the deep sea. When I was chief scientist at NOAA, the very first thing I wanted to do was to see if we could assemble a group to look at the best chance we would ever have to safeguard half the planet, the high seas. That was 1991. We got about 40 countries to convene in Honolulu, East-West Center, to deliberate on could there possibly be a time when nations could come together and agree that the high seas could be safeguarded as something that would be truly the common heritage of humankind. Well, 30% of the high seas is a good start. It's not enough, but it is really evidence that with knowing comes caring, and with caring, there's a potential for really securing a place for ourselves within the natural systems that make possible our existence. And I'm just thrilled to be here with all of you, those who stay on the surface. I invite you to come deep. It's there to be done. I mean, on my watch, more and more people are taking the plunge. Even with a snorkel and a mask, you can see things that our predecessors simply could not. And I just have to, I brought my notes with me. There's a quote I want to share. It's from one of my personal heroes, Barbara Tuchman. In a book that she wrote called The Guns of August, she said, history does not forgive those who were right, but who failed to persuade. We know in our hearts what is the right thing to do. And the good news is we have time, not a lot. The next 10 years, the next 6 years, will have a magnified impact on everything that follows. So bravo to all of you. for doing what you, individually, what we together can do to look at planetary security as if our lives depend on it, because they do. Thank you.
You're definitely my personal hero. And honestly, I'm so moved by your speech, Sylvia. Thank you so much. I think everyone here in this room can agree. And planetary security is like something we should really keep in mind when we discuss economics, when we discuss exploitation of the deep sea. But I would like to move on with the program and with the panel, and you're actually part of the panel, so I would like to ask all the panelists to come to the stage. Let me help you, Sylvia. Okay, I'll take the stairs. Please, I gotta sit over here so I can oversee the panel. So before we start with the questions, of course, I have to introduce all these new faces here. Boris is clear, Sylvia is clear. We have here on this panel, Farah Obaidullah. She is the founder of the Ocean and Us and Women's for Ocean platform, and the editor of the book, The Ocean and Us. And you have it in your hands. Maybe you hold it up. Nice and blue. Farah has dedicated the past 20 years to protecting the world's oceans. She has led campaigns against destructive fishing, lobbied for ocean protection, and exposed serious issues like illegal fishing and labor abuse at sea. Currently, you're advocating for a moratorium quite actively with your campaign, the Ocean Hope Tour, against deep sea mining. Nice to have you here, Farah.
Thank you.
We have Bud Dart from MSC, Victorian Shipping Company. It's my pleasure that you're here, and you're the Vice President of the Maritime Policy and Government Affairs of the MSC Group, which operates in 155 countries. But you are an experienced maritime leader with a distinguished career in policy and government and maritime law, and you served in the US Navy, the Merchant Marine, the Coast Guards, and you're also an accomplished ocean racer. So you're a sailor. Welcome to have you here. Thank you. And next to you, but we have Leila Devine. You're a BA candidate at the Barnard College of Columbia University here, majoring in the molecular biology with minors in science and public policy and anthropology. You are a dedicated scientific researcher with a focus on marine pharmacology and microbiology. I'm not a scientist, sorry for that. Your advocacy for the environment and the ocean is deeply rooted in your own experiences because you grew up in Hawaii, in Hilo. She's passionate about scientific communication in policy context, marine protected areas in particular, the high seas and research. You are currently serving on the board of directors and as a youth leadership council member at the Echo Earth International. We're going to hear about that in a second. Warm welcome. Nice to have you here. Last but not least, to my right here is Ingo Naberhaus, Dr. Ingo Naberhaus from the German Ministry of the Environment. You are a biologist and a senior policy advisor. You are head of the Division for General and Strategic Affairs in Marine Protection, and as you know, over 17 years of experience in international ocean governance negotiations at the EU, regional and global levels. And you're a leading expert in the deep sea mining and represents actually Germany at the International Seabed Authority. Welcome to the panel. So, Boris, let me go back to that statement from Sylvia. when you sail, do you really realize what's underneath, or do you just look at the horizon? Is there like something like a deeper reflection of an ocean racer like you going across the high seas that you think, oh my God, this is like 4,000 meters deep here, and what's actually underneath? Are there sea monsters? Is there anything that is like following me? What is your view, your reflection on this?
I must admit, all these years of sailing, growing up sailing, I know the shades and the colors of the sea, the shapes of the waves, but I never thought too much about what's underneath. Only much later I was struck by a fact that scientists explained to me that the oceans are really Earth's air conditioning system. They absorb almost all the energy, the excess heat energy of global warming, because they're not just, as you said, covering so much surface, but also reach so deep. When we sail fast over the ocean, we can't look into the water except a few very rare moments in the doldrums, maybe, where it's no wind and the sun is almost vertical, and then you can manage to look probably quite deep into the oceans. You see these sun rays going deep into blue water that are maybe 1 or 2 days per year, and other than that, it's really a view on the surface.
And then probably like sooner or later we will see like more of these exclusion zones, these marine protected areas. Maybe like a question, maybe Leila, because you're also working at the High Seas Alliance, and you're monitoring actually these called MPAs, these marine protected areas. How is the characteristics of these protected areas? Like, is this something that we are not allowed to go, even like as sailors, that we're not allowed to like sail through? Is this like I know, like an area where which is going to be also, of course, flourishing with reefs, and where all the animals, because I mean the fish, they don't select their places, they move around. Can we all like hold them there and say this is your area and you're not moving away?
Yeah, most definitely. And I mean, like kind of like we were talking about earlier with the background from Hawaii. Hawaii is home to Papahanaumokuakea, very long name, and it's one of the largest marine protected areas out there. And growing up scuba diving, so definitely below the surface of the ocean, it's something that really opened my eyes into how scientists have been able to truly understand the ins and outs of the ocean. And when we're looking at the establishment of marine protected areas, for example, in Papahanaumokuakea, one of the things that we can look at are marine protected areas that are considered no-take zones. And so these are areas specifically in which fishing is prohibited, and oftentimes with Papahanaumokuakea, for example, it was expanded twice. And so the second kind of realm of expansion, not necessarily a no-take zone, but these are regions of the ocean, specifically home to Hawaii, that also have substantial cultural significance. So has definitely been a major part in looking at Native Hawaiian practitioners and several different cultural practices that take place that surround the ocean as well, which truly emphasizes not only the importance that the ocean has for providing a place for life, but also looking at a lot of the offshore and local communities that are truly and deeply rooted to the ocean. And so when we're looking at different areas, different marine protected areas, there's a lot to kind of take into consideration and to also just look at with what's happening and where it's happening as well.
Interesting. And then moving on maybe to like those people that are coming more from the corporate world, MSC, big shipping company. So you move goods and people around the world, crossing these areas. What happened, like what was the reaction of MSC when the UN adopted the BBNJ, the High Sea Treaty? Was there any like consequences? You said, okay, this is something really serious now, we really have to change our business, we have to do low streaming here, we have to, where are the next like marine protected areas? What was the reaction of MSC, and how do you basically deal with that topic of the high seas and how to protect it?
Yeah, well, I have to say, first of all, my history with this goes back long before I worked for MSC, back in the days of the you're going to be impressed. I'm not looking at notes. The United Nations ad hoc open-ended working group on biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction. Anything that can be called that and survive for, what was it, about 15, 20 years of work, I think, that went into this preliminarily, deserved a very serious look, and I think people that didn't know something was coming weren't paying attention. So from an industry perspective, now and those are my days with the US government, but now that I work for MSC, I have to say, our main concern with it, I think it's true for most of the ship owner associations, was just to ensure that the development of this convention, which is really largely a framework convention, the actual implementation will matter a lot, and protective measures will really make the difference here, that it didn't create conflicts with regimes that are already in place and working to regulate shipping. Because, I'm happy to say, shipping, the way it's regulated globally with volumes of international conventions, never is without national jurisdiction, except for those vessels which may be stateless, which are illegitimate. Other than that, there is never a ship without a state. So there is never a place where there isn't some government that has responsibility, and there are many times, there are multiple governments that could claim responsibility to enforce those standards. So I believe the final result, although we were a little concerned at sometimes, I think is a good result. And I think involving the International Maritime Organization Secretariat to help deconflict that was a really good idea, because I do think we now have that framework convention with BBNJ that can coexist peacefully with the other conventions that are in place to regulate international shipping that actually do work pretty effectively. For example, when you talk about solid waste, which is essentially the phrase garbage under the IMO convention, the basic rule is none of it can ever be discharged overboard. There's a couple of small exceptions. That's a pretty good start. I'd love to see the rest of the world do that, because that's certainly not the type of regulation we see shoreside, but we should. So I applaud it, I support it, and I think now as we move on to implementing, make sure that those implementing measures are practical and workable. And I take no direct position on deep seabed mining, but I do find it very ironic that we wouldn't have had UNCLOS certainly winning at it in 1982, the Jamaica Convention on the Law of the Sea. We might have never had it not been for a completely fraudulent story at the time about deep seabed mining, which really was construction of a ship meant to do something very different that the CIA was sponsoring, but it got it done. And now it turns out deep seabed mining for the same thing, manganese nodules was the cover story. It's actually a very real problem now. The technology has finally caught up, and I'm thankful we have a regime that can cover it, and I'm thankful that people are keyed in to thinking about what's the long-term effect on the ocean's health.
Thank you. By the way, I want to have a dynamic discussion. So Sylvia was like raising almost the microphone. Do you want to say something? Please say it, right? I have like, yeah,
Come
go ahead.
in.
Please.
No, go ahead. Now that I have license to do it, I will.
Right. So we have the high seas. There is a legal definition. Everything was like beyond the economic zone of 200 miles. But then we have the deep sea, and I think next to you, for deepness, to be overall, we have Farah, and you are concerned more about the deep sea with your project that you have created. Actually, you talked about in The Hague during the Ocean Race when we met the first time, and you were sitting on a panel here talking about women in the ocean, in ocean care and ocean protection, and now you have enrolled your new project, which is the moratorium, the Ocean Hope Tour. But tell me, what is the deep sea, and what inspires you about the deep sea, and what is this Hope Tour all about?
Yeah, thank you. So, as you said in the introduction, Cornelius, I've been working in the ocean space for 20 years on a whole host of issues, right? From sustainable seafood to, to saving the whales, to this treaty, the BBNJ treaty. And I've spent a lot of time also on destructive legal overfishing and also illegal overfishing. But it also meant that I spent time on the ocean, on the high seas. And I have to say that this rush to mine the deep sea is honestly the most terrifying thing I can think of for the ocean that we face. because it's not just about opening up one mining site in the ocean, right? I mean, it's really difficult for us land-based animals to conceptualize what a mine in the ocean will look like. If we think about the fact that at the moment there's 31 or so exploratory licenses already issued by the International Seabed Authority, so they're exploration licenses, but if they were all to turn into exploitation licenses, we're talking about an area of 1.3 million square kilometers that we would open up in the ocean to mining. And that's just the licenses that are currently there, exploration licenses. But let's be honest, if one country starts mining, we are opening the floodgates to all countries to start mining. And this is terrifying. It is, you know, Sylvia touched upon it in her opening remarks. The importance of the deep sea, it is our cradle of life. You mentioned it too, Cornelius. The ocean, you know, it is the world's largest carbon sink. That carbon, it's in the fish, it's in life in the ocean, but it's also, you know, in the seabed. And we know from studies that if we start disturbing the seabed, we know that from studies on fisheries, bottom fisheries, for example, then we risk re-releasing that carbon back into the water column. And we also know, as Sylvia said, these are ancient habitats. They will not be regenerated on human timescales. And now coming back to my personal issue with this, or my personal sort of passion about deep sea mining, is that I have spent time on the high seas, and I have seen how impossible it is to effectively regulate activities on the high seas. It doesn't matter how good it looks on paper. I've witnessed illegal fishing happening on the high seas where we've documented the crime red-handed. We've seen, you know, for example, a catcher or a transshipment vessel, a reefer, onloading, so taking on board fish from 6 catcher vessels, 6 tuna catcher vessels. All of it was illegal. There was, in the hold, I was fortunate enough to go into the hold of the ship, and it was the size of a basketball court, and it was almost all full of tuna, all illegally caught, all destined for the global tuna market, including in the US and the European Union.
It's a luxury market. This is not
It's not food security, no, by no means. But anyway, I was unable, despite all the evidence, documentation that we followed the ship for days, unable to get any enforcement by any country, because it's the high seas. It takes a lot of political capital for one country to take another country to court over an activity that doesn't happen in their sovereign waters. So with deep sea mining, I worry that we're not ready, even if, you know, as the International Seabed Authority, you know, is trying to finalize the mining code. We are simply not ready to deep sea mine from a regulatory point of view, and of course, from a personal point of view, we should just never even go there. We should just leave the ocean be. And so, sorry, I can get very passionate about this, but so I have dedicated the last 4 years on this singular issue, on securing a moratorium, if not a ban, on deep sea mining in the high seas. And when I started this work 4 years ago, there was no country, I think, speaking out against deep sea mining. We now have 25 countries calling for a pause or a moratorium or even a ban on deep sea mining. So, you know, but it's not enough, and it's not happening quick enough. So, yeah.
All right, and the Ocean Hope Tour that you're now like planning is actually like an advocacy journey through South America, right? Can you just like give us like a little bit of like information
Sure.
on what you're planning?
Yeah, no, so when I returned from the International Seabed Authority meeting in Jamaica last year, I was really thinking, but what can we do to as Sylvia also mentioned, and you mentioned, Cornelius, bring the high seas or the ocean to the hearts, connect it to our hearts. And at the moment, it's just too far away. And so the idea that I'm now sort of developing and embarking on is a journey from Alaska down to the south of Chile, and engaging with communities along the entire route, from fishing communities to First Nations communities to conservation groups, tech companies, universities, schools, and connecting what they understand the ocean to be to the deep sea. And so that we understand that whether we're talking about the vaquita, which is a very endangered animal, porpoise, the cetacean in Mexico, so we understand that, you know, there's only 10 of those animals left, but if we're going to protect that animal, we need to make sure that the area adjacent to where that animal swims, which is the Clarion-Clipperton zone, which is the area that they want to open up, which is ground zero for mining, we need to make sure that people understand what's at stake. And I want to do that through the things that people can relate to, whether that's the blue whale, the vaquita, the salmon fisheries, the kelp forests. All the beauty of the ocean is connected to the deep sea. And so this is an ambitious trip, but the Pacific Ocean is ground zero for mining, and I want the International Seabed Authority and all the members of that authority to understand that there is no social license to mine the deep sea.
So here we are, the Seabed Authority. I didn't even know that this organization exists, and you are representing Germany there. Ingo, what happens to you if you hear this kind of like power and energy coming from over there? That activists like such as Farah traveling through South America, you know, hands on the ground, connecting with the local communities and teach them, you know, about the high seas, the deep sea. Is this something that you have in mind when you walk into these meeting rooms with your colleagues at the authority there? Is this, where are we actually in the process of this mining code that you mentioned? And what's the position of Germany?
Okay, that's a lot of questions. First of all, I don't know what I think when I walk into these meeting rooms, so it's difficult to explain. I've been doing that for a couple of years now, and these negotiations are very intense, very focused, and extremely complex. There are many issues that are to be dealt with this mining code. Many open questions. We only had a paper published last year in Marine Policy stating the number of thematic fields to still discuss substantially before a mining code can be agreed, and that is 30 different really fields of work that is still missing. So there's a lot to be done. When you asked about the activists' work, we appreciate that a lot, because only through this sort of public work, the consciousness of an awareness is being developed, and it's not self-evident. The deep seas are not close to an everyday person, and that's only natural. So it needs to be explained. That's why people like Sylvia and Farah and many others are so important to explain what we know about it. So we don't know much about the deep sea, and that leads me also to our position. And even though Sylvia has nicely explained that we know so much more than maybe 50 or 100 years ago, but the deep sea and the deep sea ecosystems are the least understood on Earth, and the least researched. And what we do know is that there are thriving ecosystems down there, that we have a wealth of species, that there are extreme conditions, and but what we don't know is what are these species, and how do they function, how do they interact with each other, what is the role of deep sea ecosystems in the global system and global climate system as well. So we have many open questions on the deep seas, and that led to our thinking also in Germany when 2 years ago we took a position to call for a precautionary pause. And that is because the risk is too high on the current basis of knowledge to take such a potentially broad-scale activity forward. So until we have the science available on potential impacts, on the role of these ecosystems, we call for a precautionary pause. We don't want to support any permits for deep sea mining at this stage.
Mm-hmm. And actually that brings me again to this question, also related to the High Sea Treaty, is enforcement, right? So, you know, I mean, we can have like the best tailor-made treaties on the world, and everyone can agree, but if it's not enforced, sanctioned on the ground, it's not going to happen. And this is like, I think, one of the biggest challenge with the high seas, where it is, you know, beyond jurisdiction. Who's going to enforce that? I mean, it's a question to all of you. I mean, is like, how can we bridge this gap between implementation, adoption of these treaties, paperwork, and the actual, like, you know, police out there monitoring this, naming and shaming the bad guys, but also like then really sanctioning. And I mean, you can sanction countries. Well, country can like put sanctions, but can you sanction pirates? Can you sanction people that are like illegally operating in these waters? What do you think?
The problem is who has the jurisdiction to do that? You know, so that's the big issue that we face, because it will require political will of one country to say, okay, you know what, you're not playing by the rules. But that's a big ask.
That's where I think a multilateral approach through a UN convention makes a lot of sense, because if you're a state party to the convention, you then have rights that you can assert for enforcement that don't exist on the high seas in the absence of that in most cases. Piracy, by the way, is a different example. Any country can enforce against piracy worldwide anytime they feel like it. But I'm going to make one other point, if I could, about deep sea mining, and a little out of my comfort zone in my job today. I used to be pretty closely involved in a lot of this. And the way the UNCLOS convention is structured, and also the way this may work in practicality, it may not just be the corporations that are going to be involved in the exploration and exploitation that you have to worry about. Because I think that it's very likely there will be revenue sharing, particularly with developing countries who drove the 1982 convention in the first place. And once those revenues start coming in, it's going to be really, really difficult to disgorge those.
But the question is, will there actually be any revenue coming in? A really cool business guy, an investment hero, Victor Vescovo, you know him, of course, everybody should. He's one of the very few who have been to the deepest part of the ocean, 11 kilometers down, and come back. He has done a great job of crunching the numbers, and he just says it's such a scam that those who will walk away with money are those who are convincing the investors that this is a good deal. It just doesn't stack up. First of all, operating in the deep sea is still a challenge. We can get there. We can do a pretty good job of destroying things. But the actual economic basis is simply an illusion. It just is, unless the price for those minerals goes this high, it just can't work. And yet, it's so seductive to say they're just out there, and if we don't get them, somebody else will. And part of the gamesmanship right now is China has access to some of these rare earth minerals. We don't want them to be the only source. Let's go to the deep sea and give them a run for their money. It's just so far removed from the reality. The most important thing we take from the ocean is our existence. I mean, we live because the ocean is still in pretty good shape. We still have a chance. But if we keep moving in the direction we've been moving, just thinking the ocean is good for what we can take out of it, or the ocean is great because we can dump things there that we don't want close to where we live, that model is not going to end well for us. This is the first time, maybe the last best chance we'll ever have, to change our relationship with the ocean. To understand that our existence really is dependent on maintaining planetary security. And that's a biological reality. We're getting to make peace with the land. We're certainly not there yet. But the ocean is still just wide open. Another kind of mining that you know about is mining the deep scattering layer of life that is just the edge of light. It's called the twilight zone. Really important for climate because it's this huge band of carbon, squid, little fish, crustaceans, jellies, again, a cross-section of life that migrates up close to the surface at night to feed on the products of photosynthesis that take place during the day, and then sink back down to like 1,000 meters where it's really dark all of the time. And it's creatures from above dive down. Where do you think tuna get their groceries? And whales. And all of those other high seas creatures, they dive down. Turtles. Even somebody, you wouldn't think that a turtle could hold its breath long enough to go down 1,000 meters to munch on jellyfish. But leatherback sea turtles, that's what they do. We didn't know that when I was a kid. Now that we do know it, and you patch it together with all these other bits and pieces of information, it really does seem, now we know. What we could not know before, we still have a chance. The best chance we will ever have. One more quick thing, that a couple of weeks I'm going to Hawaii. Well, some of you will be in Costa Rica. I wish I could be there with you. But I'll be with the Pacific Voyaging Society and leaders from across the Pacific who are gathering. It's mostly a celebration that they do every year, but this time, there is something more. We're getting together, Pacific Island leaders, to think about what can they do to safeguard their sacred home, the Pacific Ocean. For them, the land is just the heart of their home. It's the ocean. Their home is blue, and they're about to raise their voices in a really more meaningful way than ever before to say, it is about life support, but it's also, it's our history. It's everything we care about. It's a sacred place. And we need to think of the ocean with respect, more than just a place to take things.
I think the big problem is like the ignorance. But Ingo, you want to...
Yeah, if I may, just coming back to the issue of monitoring and enforcement, which is a challenge in these very remote areas. Once we establish marine protected areas, it will be up to the flag states and the port states to implement their obligations. It will be a challenge to foster capacities and on technical capacities actually, and to bring that up to speed. We will also profit probably from new technologies in monitoring, satellite technologies, also artificial intelligence technologies, which we're already using for monitoring, by the way, for the German North Sea. So this will all be important. And when it comes to potential future deep sea mining, we're not excluding it. If it happens, we're currently developing a compliance system as part of the mining code. We will not have pirates in deep sea mining. It's too complex to do deep sea mining. So we will have big ships, big companies that are to be regulated, but we need instruments and institutions under the ISA to develop an inspectorate and to develop an independent compliance.
Isn't it like also like a problem that because like this topic of education and knowledge and ignorance, right? Isn't it like a priority actually to first have evidence and have exploring the deep sea and really knowing what's going on there before these kind of like acceptance of certain drillings, gas and oil industry is another topic, but like deep sea mining is now coming up. That we have a solid knowledge about like the life that is happening and going on there. And I think, Boris, maybe you can tell us a little bit about our projects, because you are so much involved in the science and ocean scientist community, and while you're racing, we're collecting this data. And I mean, do you see like that there is in the last years and since the campaign started, and actually quoting this because this was the time in 2019 when you said get a tour back to New York, you had it on your sails, unite behind the science. So let's gather around the science, the facts before we start, implementing stuff like deep sea drilling, deep sea mining. Like since this campaign started, like do you think that there is like a growing interest also from the science community in these topics, and that we just have the problem of communicating the science to the generations here?
Well, I think the question is how topics emotionally impact a wider audience and a wider general public. And I think your work is really important to understand, because you might think, oh, these little things, they lie on the ground and you pick them up. And so sometimes these scientific things are really not so easy to make them, bring them across in an emotionally impactful way. And so I think that's maybe something we are trying to contribute a little bit where we can in different areas. And I think we have a motivation as a team to grow the scope of the topics we talk about. And so that's a reason why I'm particularly happy that you brought us all together here today. Right.
Can I, sorry, do you mind if I just step in? Oh, just on on deep sea mining again, and why the tour that I'm planning is called the Ocean Hope Project, is because it is about, if we think about the climate crisis that we're facing and the nature crisis that's unfolding, we all see that, right? But with deep sea mining, this is something we still have the opportunity to stop before it starts, right? And so we can really sort of, if we can give agency back to the people that feel, all of us, that feel the despair of what's happening to our natural world, and if we can unite together, whether we are sailors, whether we're artists, whether we're musicians, it doesn't matter where we are in the world or what we do, this is about the high seas. They don't belong to any one nation, so they belong to all of us. And whether we are fishermen, whatever industry we come from, we can unite behind this. And this is why I've chosen to call it the Ocean Hope Project. And I'm very happy that,
you agree and you're nodding a lot. Is it like, how do you do that in your organization, the Echo Earth International?
Earth Echo.
Earth Echo.
It's okay, you're good.
I'll
I mean, I think for me, I'm coming here with a scientific background and a scientific perspective, obviously. But a lot of why I'm here in the room with you all today, kind of as a young person, as more so a youth spokesperson, also is the fact that my background in science is what got me into the advocacy world in the first place, because I spent a lot of time in the ocean, scuba diving, exploring the reefs, and growing up in Hawaii, one of the things that I obviously noticed was the coral bleaching events that were occurring in the first place, within my hometown, within a drivable distance of my home, directly into the ocean. And I was working in a lab, and one of the things that we were doing is finding a sustainable way to look at these novel isolates for different novel compounds that could be used to combat things such as cancer. Because the ocean brings a lot to us, including more sustainable ways to be able to look at and utilize and be immersed in our environment around us. But one of the things that I was noticing is that there was a gap between what was happening in the lab, everything that was happening, all of these amazing discoveries, they were being published in these journals, but no one was really actually talking about it and bringing it out there and bringing it into the community, right? And I think, if I were to categorize a lot of the work that I do, it's really focused around scientific storytelling. It's looking at what's happening, for example, in the high seas, and looking at the communities that are around us, and taking a look at the science that's being done, and laying down the facts and saying, listen, all of this is happening, but nobody knows about it. The number of people in my community that know about the BBNJ has been increasing over time, but I will say that, when a lot of this was first starting, that's definitely not the case. And as a youth spokesperson as well, I want to say that a lot of what was happening around the BBNJ started around 2 decades ago, right? For me, 2 decades ago is when I took my first steps into the ocean.
Three decades.
Three decades ago. A lot of the original UN ICP work as well. And so if we kind of take a look at where we are today, essentially I've also kind of grown up to be in the room here with you and looking at the action that has needed to be taken, that's long overdue. It's an honor to be able to be here to speak with you all, but it's also kind of looking at, as the BBNJ has been adopted and as ratifications are occurring, why we need swift action now. And so for me, that's a very big part of it.
Absolutely.
So, about 20 years ago, I attended a conference in Hamburg. It was a shipping conference. And the convener started the meeting by just putting it out there. He said, imagine if we could go back 50 years, knowing what we now know about the effect of water ballast and the transfer of creatures from one part of the planet to the other, and the disruption of systems that have happened since. What if only we knew about the carbon emissions, about the nitrous oxide, about the noise that is created as ships, that we could make the big propellers quieter. We just didn't know it mattered. We could have come up with more efficient ways to power ourselves. We didn't know it mattered. Okay, just imagine 50 years in the future. What are we going to know that we don't know now? Right now, the magnitude of our ignorance is the biggest problem that faces the way forward. The deeper we go in the ocean, the less we know, but the more new discoveries we're finding. And there are some champions, such as Ian Urbina, who's out there putting the light on the problems with high seas fishing, the slavery, the impact on humans as well as on the ocean. It's the Wild West in the high seas. The governance has been a long time coming, but now that we know what we didn't know before, we're better prepared than ever to look at these issues about efficiency, about sound, about our impact on ocean life and why it matters to climate, why it matters to ocean chemistry, why it matters to our survival, not just the survival of whales and tunas and coral reefs. And I think that there will never be a better moment in time to do what you're suggesting, to share whatever it is that you have that needs to be known. One man, one octopus, in 1 year, with one film and one Oscar, now one book. That's Craig Foster, my octopus teacher. He's probably had more impact than 100 cephalopod scientists or squid fishers, whatever, to get people to think differently about these extraordinary creatures and how we should care about them in giving us new insight. So I'm so glad to be here as a part of this conversation, to hear from all of you, your powers, and to hope that we won't leave this room without thinking, each of us, what can be done from this moment onward to change this trajectory?
Actually, it's a really good question to the audience. What can be done? And I want to involve you. We're a little bit over time, and I get already bad faces from my colleagues. But still, I would like to allow the audience, because we're so passionate about here, to ask questions. One question, maximum two. Okay, let's say 2 questions, depending on the length of the question. Any questions here? We have plenty.
They're stunned.
They're stunned.
Well, they're thinking, I'm going to make one of them.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've talked a lot about the things people feel passionately about. I think it's great we focused on those things, but Dr. Earle made a comment about it's not too late to stop something that's going to be harmful. I want to give another example. I mean, we're the world's leading shipping company, largest by far in liner shipping. Leaders need to lead. And one thing we absolutely believe is that shipping does not belong in the northern sea routes. And to this date, it's only been very limited. We know that China and the Russian Federation would like to open that up. They'd like to make an alternative to the Suez Canal. That's a terrible idea. It is absolutely not worth the risks that it poses to the environment in many different ways. We feel very strongly about that. We're happy Hapag-Lloyd, which is also a sponsor of Malizia, has joined us too, and I really would like to see governments get behind that, because I think it's very important, and it's not too late to stop what I think would be a grievous mistake to make that a frequently traveled traffic lane for shipping.
some places should be sacred.
We did it with Antarctica, Antarctic Treaty. We can, as countries, come together and protect a collective, you know, our global commons. And I would like to see that happen for the high seas.
Yeah, why not think of the high seas as literally the blue heart of our life support system? First, do no harm. Of course you can go there. Of course you can extract value. But at what cost? You have to weigh that against the impact on everything that matters, like our existence.
Well, is there a question? If not,
Okay, I will have one.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm the PR of Monaco.
we need the
Oh,
microphone. One second.
thank you. So I'm the PR of Monaco to the UN, and I couldn't agree more with what every one of you has said. So I know, Boris, that with Team Malizia, you have done a lot of outreach while you were there. What was your main impression with the kids that you could interact with? And what would be your advice for us, government, to try to simplify whatever we do so that normal people understand what we want to achieve?
Well, that's a challenging question. For me personally, in the interaction with the school classes, sometimes we do video links from the ocean, or we meet, we invite, we go out with kids and youngsters. They very often know about many of the problems we're speaking about. And I think school systems can put much more emphasis on these topics, even more. So it varies a lot from the countries. I believe some countries have actually ocean as a school subject. I think there was one, we looked at that, there was one country that actually had that, can't remember which one. And in some countries they have very dedicated curricula on climate change and ocean impact. All the kids know about climate change that we have met so far, most of them. And plastic pollution is obviously always the very well-known big global topic. I think if governments and curricula emphasis more on the ocean. We learn a lot about geography, land geography, but I think way too little about ocean geography.
Thank you. All right, I would like to close this panel discussion. Thank you so much for being here. It was an excellent panel. I feel fairly thrilled, and I hope also the audience is now, ready to go out. And now, if you have kids, we have this education program, and you can download actually this program as a PDF in 12 different languages from our website, Team Malizia website. Thank you so much for your passion and patience. And I invite our guests now to come up to the rooftop for the snacks and the drinks. And thank you again for being here. And Malizia.